Okay, so we're going to have a second session right now with Evan Davis. Evan, if you could share your screen. Thank you very much, Gregory. And if you can, remove the camera.
Of course.
And got the mic as well. So Evan, I don't know if you can hear us or not. So Evan is about to join right now. So I see he is on and he's trying to connect. So Evan, if you can just go, I'm going to make you a presenter right now. Evan Davis. Okay, here we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, Evan.
Okay.
We can see you yet. If you can put your camera on as well. Perfect. We see your screen right now, Evan. Thank you very much.
You can see my screen? Okay.
100%.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Hey, well, okay, go ahead, Evan.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evan, and Evan Davis with Wiiisdom, and I work as an SE. And over the last few months, maybe a year and a half or so, 2 years, we've been hearing a lot of customers talking about the fact that they're finding real challenges in accessing cloud-based databases. One of the main areas of concern, is that obviously with cloud-based databases, typically they're priced per query or length of query or amounts of query. Anyway, the key element is that the more you use the cloud database, the more expensive it becomes, which of course is highly ironic in a business intelligence world, because we want people to be querying the environment and finding out as much value as they can. But obviously we're getting dinged now in terms of cost. So every way we look at this from a BI platform perspective now, we're starting to see that we really need to be very mindful of what sort of environment we're putting up. So there's a significant pressure now to reduce query times on those databases. So we're really looking to engineer efficiencies in your business intelligence platforms. Obviously, the vast majority of time we spend querying and outputting data from your data sources. So clearly we are going to access your databases as much as any other application. And of course, generally speaking, this needs to be all part of an overall BI delivery platform. Whenever we look at business objects, there's always a number of different components. There's always a different broader infrastructure considerations that need to be taken. So this is not something that can be considered out in isolation. And again, build your best practice.
Just one thing is, I was just curious to ask the audience if they have some issues when it comes to queries to Databricks or Snowflakes, as an example. Is this an issue that they have internally or not? And where they're being asked to do something about this topic. So I'd be curious to get some feedback on that. So I'll let you continue, Evan. Thank you very much.
And the areas that we're going to focus on predominantly here, obviously this is a short discussion here, so we can't go into specific details on a lot of other areas here, but just from a high level perspective, I think there are a number of areas that we can look at in terms of improving efficiency of our, in terms of generating queries against these databases. We'll look at specifically at universe and database enhancements that one can perform, report design considerations, look again a little bit at how you can re-architect certain aspects of the platform, and then finally have a quick look and see how we can possibly help in this process and assist you in this endeavor. So again, universe and database best management practices. From a database perspective, obviously what we're looking at to try and improve organized and stored. We often find that creating store procedures to denormalize any complex data relationships will obviously yield significant advantages, as well as performing any kind of database aggregations across common dimensions and hierarchies. Anything that you can pre-cook, so to speak, inside of the database is going to obviously drastically improve your query efficiency, reducing time and cost and so forth. And again, avoid reporting against real-time systems as a general rule. These are typically highly normalized and can often result in very inefficient queries that can obviously extend the life of the query on the database. And look at the other, constructive ways to potentially create report-focused data stores to access commonly accessed data. And then finally, one obviously key important point is if you can possibly offload historical data to archive data storage, then by definition, the size of the database is going to be considerably smaller. And then looking from the universe perspective, obviously we could use aliases. Obviously, there's a lot of universe design paradigms that one can adopt to improve efficiency within the universe. Obviously, using aliases simplifies complex paths. Database aggregations as well can be generated within the universe using the aggregate aware functions, again, improving efficiency. And make sure you build slimmed down universes specific to business requirements rather than just connecting to the database and bringing everything in because it maybe is there. Obviously, just really focus on bringing in what is actually needed, having smart, what you might call slimmed down universes that are again very specific to whatever kind of subject matter they're supposed to support. And then of course within the whole environment here, you can also define limits as part of the platform in terms of the volume of data returned and execution time. So these can all be controlled at the web intelligence application level. So moving on. Again, from a report design perspective, you used to find that many challenges here, but one is to users bearing in mind that one of the things that business objects does help us with is the concept of instances, where you can have stored data inside of reports and web intelligence documents, and then by bringing those up, just using instances as opposed to the queries themselves, then you can generally reduce the number of refreshes against the database and so forth. Again, using those instances that are pre-cooked and then can be delivered and made available to a bunch of users. Use of filters, of course. You can have one query and then filter down so that you only have one filter against the database, one query against the database, and then you're using filters to again stream that down and then be able to deliver that specific types of views of that data, but only again using a single query. And then time and date-based parameters. Obviously, the more data you retrieve back from your queries, more expensive. If you can use time and date-based parameters to kind of reduce the amount of data returned, that's only going to bring back the amount that you need as opposed to bring back the amount that you have, then that again will improve efficiencies. From a Crystal design perspective, I always used to encourage the use of pre-built optimized SQL queries to actually be the basis of those reports, rather than using the Crystal engine to kind of connect tables and generate very, very kind of broad ANSI related kind of SQL. It's not optimized and it could be very inefficient. So within Crystal particularly, you can copy and paste in predefined your SQL queries. They could be optimized such that they're going to be at maximum efficiency, and then use that as the data source. So when you're querying the database, you're making sure that it's the most effective querying possible. From Webby perspective, there are a number of inbuilt tools. Obviously, query stripping will pull out any redundant data. You can limit the drilling scope inside of documents, again, to avoid potential data refreshes. And again, whilst we would always encourage the use of the universes and with Webby documents, in some particularly isolated extent, you always do have access to freehand SQL. It's not allowed. It's there. Again, you use some of the benefits of the universe, but in some instances it might be palatable and maybe the best option to actually, again, in the same way with Crystal, use optimized SQL queries for very, very specific types of reports. Again, not overly encouraging this as a general rule, but again, it is a possible thing here. And again, within self-service platform, make sure obviously your users are fully trained and they know exactly what they're doing and not just flashing around with doing queries and so forth without control and so forth. And you again can apply best practices in terms of that development. You can work with your power users to say, try and limit the amount of this and that and so forth, ways to actually design their reports to again limit the amount of queries both in the development phase as well as the production delivery as well. And of course, you can enforce strict standards for self-service functionality and the scope as well, and that's all part of the business objects platform. From a delivery perspective, one of the things that we spent a lot of time in the previous world to actually enable efficiency was to actually put what we might call a push rather than pull methodology. So a lot of business object platforms rely on people coming into the platform, logging on, running their queries, and then logging off and so forth. A lot of benefits can be gained by, rather than having people come onto the platform, that actually deliver the contents directly to the users. So in other words, generating instances on the platform and then pushing those instances directly to the users. Again, it enables you to potentially push that content directly to where the users need it, where they want it, in their email or on a file somewhere or in SharePoint. Reports in this way and being able to generate information out can also improve query performance, because again, it will optimize queries and make sure it doesn't do redundant queries, because we can actually do single pass, which enables a single query filtered to multiple instances for delivery. So again, optimizing the fact that that query can now be used for multiple delivery of multiple reports directly out to the users. Again, avoids the generation redundant queries if we're setting up on a regular scheduler. And of course, it pushes the director directly to the user in the most appropriate format. So typically PDF or Excel documents and so forth, and then they're sent directly to the users. They don't need to log onto the platform or anything like that to be able to pick up that information. Again, reducing the amount of activity on the platform as well as the queries emanating from it. And then again, rather than logging on, the user is going to look at their report locally and therefore not need to even log onto the platform at all. And again, from a platform security perspective, we can control refresh rights and purge rules and so forth. That again could be used to fundamentally manage the query operation. So in summary,
Just a question for you is, I think recently you were sharing a story with me where, the issue of the new cloud data warehouse costs is such a big topic. I think you were sharing a story where some organizations that not to mention any name, but it is such a big issue right now that the costs are completely out of control.
Oh, completely, yeah.
And what were they doing?
They're now literally reducing the number of queries that people can do. So they literally say, hey, come the afternoon, you can't query the database anymore. It's as simple as that. It's crazy. And obviously they're moving away from it as well, which is another point. But yeah, absolutely. It's really completely hamstrung the business. This extensive cost for querying the database. They were so used to just basically, oh, I can run my query, I'll run my query, and that whole aspect is now completely changed. It's completely gated now, very, very restrictive. So yeah, because the costs are astronomical.
And what's very interesting is in the past, it was typically more of an IT, an IT issue, an IT charge on that. And right now what happens, well, there's no more fixed cost around the data warehouses, and it was very predictable about, how much money was a data warehouse costing to maintain, et cetera. Where right now, because the queries are so much out of control, what we see now is more and more there's some chargeback, showback systems where essentially IT is just saying, hey, it's not our problem. We're just making sure that you can connect, for example, with Bobj to Snowflake. But essentially is, if you're consuming more, it is really your problem of your business unit. So it's quite interesting to see that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And profound, especially in BI world, because that's our meat and potatoes is querying databases, right? So it makes a huge impact on us. So in summary, broadly speaking, what we look at, is kind of like a step-by-step approach, or a way of looking at this and rationalizing the different steps that you need to take. Obviously, from a database, there's kind of a hierarchy down here in terms of database optimization, then utilizing that optimization in the development of your universe design and ensuring that's optimized as well. And then stemming from that, best design report practices. Part of that is restrictive, and a part of that is actually just working with developers, power users, and just identifying where queries are generated and how they're generated, and again being able to work with them to again reduce that as part of the development process. Platform management, again, in terms of security, access to query lengths and things like that, and part of the platform can be used to control that as well. And then looking at the developing of the push architecture, as we discussed before, again, the idea of bursting content from the platform as opposed to having people come in, that's a secondary element in there. And then obviously performance metrics, the way that you can then turn around and potentially measure exactly what's going on in terms of what your activities are on the platform. That again is a fundamental part of the process. And within those two areas here, the pushing architecture and the performance metrics is somewhere where we, from a 360 perspective, we have some stuff that we can help you with that might actually assist in that process. So moving forward, the Wiiisdom approach has always been, whenever we look at things like this, is you always back up your content. So whatever you're doing in terms of rationalizing this environment and working on these new universes and so forth, always back up content to protect whatever you have. Create a full inventory of exactly what you have in your business objects repository. Half the time we never really know exactly what we have, where all the information is, where all the reports are being run from, and so forth. So you can actually create an inventory, see all the information that you have, exactly where the queries are going to be run from, because you'll see where the reports are. And again, you can rationalize that and ensure that you have the appropriate inventory and to ensure that, again, you're already storing what you are going to need and use. And again, assess, determine what the scope and impact of what your changes will be. Again, you can look through reporting against the metadata of that environment to see exactly what happens if I make a change to this universe, what is the impact for the reports and so forth. And again, part of managing that process. Again, from an implementation perspective, where you can make changes using bulk operations, that's always very, very useful. Within the context of this, if you're finding that you want to, master each series of reports, then you can do that in bulk. You don't necessarily have to do things one by one. So the implementation phase will obviously enable you to potentially use bulk activities to make those changes. Like everything needs to be tested, validate that obviously your universes are behaving the same, even though you made some optimization changes and so forth. Make sure the reports are generating the right results and so forth, and then obviously sign off and document and make sure that that everything is clearly documented and you've known exactly what the impact of the changes are and how they were made. And then looking specifically at these different areas more on the push side. So report bursting is a fundamental part of the 360 Suite platform. It is integrated directly into the platform. And what it allows us to do is to essentially drive the process of outputting information or delivering information such that we can build a file of destinations and we can run the same report or series of reports and then mass distribute those reports out to those users, typically to file stores, SharePoint, email as well, of course. And this essentially runs the processes on the platform and then just pushes out. It processes many reports within the same batch run, so you can have multiple reports and deliveries within one batch, and then you can deliver multiple content to multiple destinations in the same run. So for example, what we often see is that we'll have a report that the business user wishes to use, and that will directly deliver to the inbox in email, but there might be a corresponding archive copy that they send out to the file server somewhere that represents that particular document at a moment in time for archive purposes. Again, you've generated two different instances of the report within the same batch run. Again, very efficient way of doing that, and again, could potentially minimize the number of instances that you want to keep on the platform as well. And again, reduce the need for online access and data refreshes. Why bother going in looking at the system if you have all of the information directly delivered to you in the format that you want? And of course, more importantly, it can be integrated directly into a business object scheduling. You can use business calendars and events for a complete process management in terms of how you push this information out. And it can be just an integral part of this whole delivery. And then performance and status insight with the audit database. Again, you can actually find that as we start to push information out of this audit database, you can actually gain real insight as to what in fact is going on the system, who's logging on the system, which reports are being actively used, and so forth. So again, you can gain that status insight to again determine what kind of performance is happening on that audit database as well.
And Evan, so one, to the point here about report bursting. So we've had some very good cases with customers, for example, that were using Power BI or Tableau, and essentially they were consuming these as a reporting solution, which is actually, it's definitely not built for that. But because the queries were getting so high, people were refreshing all the time their dashboards. And so finally, we've seen cases where some flags were raised about the cost. And what happened there is customers started to use Bobj to essentially, and with 360 to use bursting and then schedule these reports on a regular basis. And that has helped them to drastically reduce the amount of queries to their cloud data warehouses, such as a Snowflake or Databricks. So there is really, if it's well planned, there is really a strong use case to be doing that, and it's definitely going to help you reduce the cost when you use Webby on that. So it's a very good use case.
Absolutely, yeah. And then looking at performance insight, I always used to say you can't measure what you can't manage what you can't measure. So looking at performance insights, we obviously have the ability to extract the metadata from your business objects environment, from both your auditing environment and your CMS environment, really to allow you to gain real insights into exactly what's happening on the actual business objects platform itself. So even just from an initial perspective, you can see the scope and usefulness of your content on the platform itself. So we can extract all your document information, instance information, universe information, connection information, all of the elements that set up your platform and where the query is going to be coming from. We can actually bring that in, create part of an inventory of it, and then determine exactly what the behavior is of each element in that platform itself. Again, constant monitoring of your business objects platform performance can also consolidate all your relevant runtime metrics into this database of record, this metadata base of record, which you can then use for reporting purposes. There are so many different elements here in terms of measurements that one could look at. We measure the duration of the activities on the report, the size of reports, the number of rows that are being returned to reports. So all of these metrics are things that you can then establish as part of your ongoing analysis of what exactly is happening from your business objects environment. So you can again measure all the different queries that are happening, the duration. You can see over time, so you can compare over time. So for example, in this scenario, you can have a situation where you see what your environment looked like in January, and then in June you can look at the environment in June and then compare the two. What's the duration of the reports that are running? How are they doing? Are the queries getting longer, etc.? Are there inefficiencies now in the platform that I need to address? So all of these things can be measured into such a way that you can then present the information, the metrics needed to be able to determine exactly what's happening at that query level, if it's growing, if it's staying the same, if you're able to reduce it over time, and so forth. So get all these things are inevitable ways of being able to measure that information here. More importantly, because we can bring our information into our 360 environment, into our databases, we can therefore reduce the amount of audit data history that you might have. So you may have a lot of audit data history that you keep because you want to just have that stuff around. Well, we can bring that information into our environment, which then allows you the capability of then potentially reducing the size of your audit data, again, through improved efficiencies in terms of that aspect as well. And then you'll be able to detect abnormal behavior. So suddenly a report runs that's got an amazingly long query, you can actually again run reports against that database to determine, oh, let's have a quick look. I can determine that this particular event has happened. If you can see it, perhaps someone has just scheduled a very, very complex report and it takes 2 hours to run. Well, in our database, we will be able to detect that, and we'll be able to say, hey, that's an abnormal behavior. We can obviously address that as needed. And as Bruno mentioned, the way that we can look at this is also to provide the vehicle, the means, the actual metrics to be able to support your chargeback models. So as the business continues to query away, you can turn around and say, hey, I can now tell you exactly at a group level, however we define our business groups inside of the business objects platform, I can now measure your access to the system. I can tell you precisely how many rows of data, how much duration your reports are running, and doing that, again, enables you to socialize those costs, potentially to the business, as again, measurement. You can actually turn around and give them absolute metrics of exactly what their usage are. And of course, from a migration perspective, if you're moving, say, from an on-premise situation to a cloud-based solution, then obviously you can compare the two. You can compare the processes, how long do they take when I was on premise and how long did it take compared to the cloud, and then you can compare the two. Obviously, knowledge is power, and that enables you then to have the broader conversations that are needed. And then finally, looking at from our testing perspective, when we actually test reports and we can compare reports, one of the things we also do is also define a key metric, which is how long do they take to run. So even within our testing environments, we can actually see the performance of the reports being compared against each other, either in the same environment or obviously in changes in between environments. And then finally, of course, if there are specific impacts or changes in reports, we can actually see those directly within Bind, and therefore, as part of the testing thing, we can detect what those changes mean and what the impact is as well. So having said that, that is what I had to share with you. Again, very much a high-level view, but just more than anything else, just really trying to get you to think in the right way and just adopt, to be able to strategize in that way and just really consider, some of the best things that you can do to, again, maximize the performance of your business objects platform. On that, I'll pass it back to Bruno.
Thank you very much, Evan, and I hope that has brought some value to the audience because it is becoming a very hot topic. And then also, folks, there is one thing I want to say. Well, Evan, you're probably going to kill me, but that's fine. Is Evan, how long have you been working on Crystal and BobJ? For how many years have you been doing that?
About 28.
And well, I just want to let you all know that Evan actually, after 28 years, is going to be retiring soon. And frankly, we all thank you for all the things that you've done in the community, all the things that you've done at Wiiisdom as well, and supporting all our customers.
Well, thank you for that, Bruno. Much appreciated.
Hey, Evan, really, you rock. Thanks a billion for everything you've done. And thank you, Evan.
My pleasure, always.